How's it going, everybody? Ryan here from the MTG Homebrew Network podcast, here to bring you today a Tiny Leaders deck, affectionately called The Facts. It is a staple of my collection. I love this deck so much. I'm playing Akiri Lineslinger and Silas Renn Seeker Adept as the two Tiny leaders, as it were. There is discourse in the greater Tiny Leaders realm of what to do about partners. The way that we play, we don't have any special rules regarding like if you can play one or the other, or if they need to add up to 3 or anything like that. We just kind of do how the cards do, the cards that are printed and the rules that they are. So I have access to Akiri Lineslinger and Silas Renn Seeker Adept. What this means is I can play blue, black, red, and white. And this deck has gone through different versions of a combination of each of those. Originally, it was Mardu with Akiri Lineslinger and Armix, Filigree Thrasher. And it went to Grixis with a different combination of commanders, including Silas Renn. But it ended up here when we all decided that just build the deck. If it's too powerful, we can address it, but it ultimately doesn't feel as though it is. So let's get into it. We could start with the creatures. Classic of the archetype of affinity, Arcbound Ravager. This guy beats face and is kind of just nuts. Gives you super awesome sack outlet for any of your artifacts that you don't need lying around. Part of the idea of this deck is to have as many artifacts as possible, making Akiri as powerful as possible and beating face. Because Akiri gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. Blocks really well because has vigilance and first strike, and attacks really well because of the same reasons. Yes, Akiri dies to lightning bolt, but like a lot of creatures do, and there's cards in the deck that play around that. But Arcbound Ravager just gives you a lot of utility, a lot of necessary utility that you wouldn't otherwise have without it. Plus the modular is very good, so even if it dies with counters on it, the counters can go to another artifact creature. Notably, Akiri, who, like, I'll admit, is the main commander of the deck. Silas is just here for late game and also the colors. Akiri's not an artifact creature. And this is... It comes up sometimes where this matters, where we're counting the number of artifacts we control. Yes, it would be nice. Yes, we could play Liquid Metal Torque, but we ultimately just want to play the artifacts and have Akiri be surrounded by them. Next, Arcbound Shikari is good for similar reasons that Arcbound Ravager is. It is not a sacrifice outlet. However, it does anthem all of your creatures permanently, even after it leaves the battlefield. And it also has modular too, so that any counters that would be on it get put onto another artifact creature. Modular is an awesome ability. I love it so much. It just makes your investing in creatures feel better, and it feels like they don't go away per se, like how a lot of creatures just kind of do. Moving on, Baleful Strix is a staple of any format that can play it. Flying Death Touch, when it enters the battlefield, draw a card for blue and a black. It's a 1/1. Wears equipment really well, attacks, blocks, enters the battlefield, does all of that phenomenally. Wouldn't play the deck without it. Next is Bomat Courier. This is a bit of a wild card. Exiling the top card of your library face down is always an inherent risk, especially since sometimes you don't have a red to pay for discard your hand and put all the exile cards into your hand. It's okay though, like we work around it. If you get to activate that ability, that's awesome. If not, like it's okay. You can just play the deck otherwise. It's a 1/1 with haste that is more than I can ask for. Moving on, Esper Sentinel. I don't think it needs to be said. This card is outrageous with like an equipment with counters on it. It's nuts. It's a once a turn Mystic Remora, where you have to pay equal to its power, and if they don't, they draw you draw a card. Big fan. Definitely a worthy inclusion. Absolutely wouldn't play this deck without it. Hangerback Walker is one of the best cards in the deck because of all of the previous mentioned cards work really well with this one, especially our commander. When Hangerback Walker dies, it makes a 1/1 Thopter for each counter on it. For each counter on it. For each counter on it. If this has 6 counters on it, you get 6 artifacts, just for this dying. That's a totally reasonable thing that's happened many times, to me, personally. I love this card so much. It's a worthy investment, like I said, with the other creatures, you just get something out of it when it dies. Which brings me also back to like Arcbound Ravager. It works so well with this card because you can either put the counters from it onto the Hangerback Walker, or you can sacrifice the Walker to this to generate those Thopters. And then you go wide with the... It's just so sweet. Moving on, Master of Ethereum is good for similar reasons that Arcbound Shikari is, but it is also a star, and it has power and toughness equal to the number of artifacts you control. So let's say your Hangerback Walker just died and you have 10 artifact lands in play. I don't think we're playing that many, but let's say you have all of that in play. This is a 16/16 for 3, giving very Death Shadow vibes of a huge creature for not that much investment. And the Lord ability on this is also very sweet. We have a bunch of 1/1s running around. Very good to make them 2/2s or 3/3s or however big they are. Scrap Trawler is a super good value card. We have a lot of things that want to go to the graveyard and be on the battlefield. So when something goes to the graveyard, you get to return something else with lesser cost to your hand. Incidentally, just having this around while you're doing the thing that the deck is normally doing just gives you outrageous value. Definitely a staple of the archetype. Scrapyard Recombiner is a card that I've been testing, and I think it's actually really good. It has modular 2, it's a 0/0, so it enters with 2 counters, and for sacrifice an artifact and tap it, you search your deck for a construct card and put it into your hand. Quickly, constructs that you are playing include Walking Ballista, we'll get to that later, Steel Overseer, the Scrapyard Recombiner itself, Scrap Trawler, Hangerback Walker, Bomat Courier, and I think that's all of them, but I think that's enough. All of the utility is there. You can set up combos. You can get so much value out of just sacrificing like a Thopter, turn it into your best card in the deck. Definitely a worthy inclusion, Scrapyard Recombiner. Like I said before, Steel Overseer. This is a staple of Affinity. It has been for a long time. Not particularly in Modern these days. It's not really doing the whole +1/+1 counters for each creature you control thing. Like Scales doesn't play it, and I guess Blue, like the Thought Monitor deck doesn't play it. But it's still a outstanding 1/1, and it just becomes a 2/2, and then a 3/3, and brings the whole team with it. This is a team player. Moving on, one of the best cards in the deck, Walking Ballista. I feel like I don't even need to explain how good this card is. It's an XX for a 0/0, enters with X counters on it. You can pay 4 mana, put another counter on it, and you can remove a counter. It deals 1 damage to any target. This is just utility. This is like such a game closer. You can wipe away their blocking 1/1s. You can ping them directly to their face. You can kill their planeswalkers if they have those. This is like one of the it's one of the affinity cards ever. It like just does the job. It gets in and does what it needs to do. And finally, a card I've been testing, I think it's really good. It is Zabaz the Glimmerwasp. Notably, amongst our 2 commanders, we don't have the color green, so we don't get to play Hardened Scales, even though a ton of our creatures have to deal with +1/+1 counters, including Zabaz. However, Zabaz cares about modular, and we are playing a bunch of modular creatures, I believe 2 or 3, which is enough. It's 4 with Zabaz, and it's worth having Zabaz in the deck, and it also is a sack outlet as a pay a red and destroy target artifact you control. Weird wording, but it is it works. It does what it needs to do. It kills Hangerback Walker if we need it dead. It kills anything that we're trying to loop with Scrap Trawler. It's just another sack outlet that costs a red to activate. So those are our creatures. I think there's a ton of creatures that have come out since I've built the deck that I haven't really considered. Tons that would probably work very well, but it just has, you know, it's worked so far, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it is broke in the good sense, maybe do ban something. Moving on. Sorceries. We're playing 2. Prismatic Ending is universal removal. It just gets rid of any non-land permanent, and we have 4 colors. Everything in this format costs less than 3, so we are just good. We clear it, and we don't have a problem doing so. And the other sorcery we play is Unearth. Personally, this could be Recommission. I think that card is possibly better with this deck. I haven't really tried it, but I love Unearth. I love that it has cycling. I love that it gets back any creature in your deck for 1 mana. Recommission costs 2. There's reasons I still play this card. I think it's really broken and really good, and I love it so much. It's one of my favorite cards ever, and I'm so happy that I get to play it. Moving on, we have Instance, Apostle's Blessing. This was originally in the sideboard. I think it's worth playing mainboard only because you need some level of, like, counter spell in any deck that is able to play it. And I think the fact that this gives artifact or creature protection from artifact or color is really a good utility. Like, if you run into a wall of like 1/1 mirror or servos or something, you can just not worry about them. You want to be getting through with Akiri. This, you know, gets the job done. I think it's really good. Moving on, Galvanic Blast is just better than Lightning Bolt in this deck. We'll get to it later, but we are playing most of the available artifact lands, as well as 30 other artifacts. This deck is all artifacts, and this is way more often than not 4 damage than it is 2. It's sometimes 2 on the first couple turns or after a very unfortunate Vandal Blast, which happened once, but most of the time this is just better Lightning Bolt. I'm a fan. Next, we have a whole bunch of non-creature artifacts, starting with Aether Spellbomb. This is a way to get around indestructible creatures. This is a cycle. This is just fine. This is such a utility card. I love it so much. We can bounce our own creatures to save them. It's like a counter spell that isn't Welding Jar also, because it is also removal. And I am a big fan. Animation Module is a card that I've always had my eye on. I always think it's like maybe better than it is. It might be worse than I think it is. But I love it because a lot of our creatures deal with +1/+1 counters, and we will more often than not have more mana than we do things to cast. So if we cast one thing or put a counter on something with like Hangerback Walker, we just get a 1/1 out of it, and that's another artifact on the board. Speaking of another artifact on the board, Bloodforged Battle Axe is broken garbage. You simply just get free tokens for dealing combat damage. And then those tokens have the same text as the first Bloodforged Battle Axe, so you just get to keep making them. This gets exponential as long as you can equip them, which we usually can. And at the end of the day, you're just making a bunch of Bone Splitters for pretty much free. I'm a fan. Cranial Plating is another equipment. It is a staple of Affinity. It always has been. Equipped creature you control gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. Double black, attach Cranial Plating to target creature you control, or equip one. We often will never pay the black. We're usually just paying 1 during our main phase and not really complaining about it. Sometimes it pays off to leave the double black open. Only because like Akiri has first strike, and not giving toughness doesn't really matter in that sense. Silas also has death touch, but whatever. I think this card is absolutely 100% not even a question. You have to play this in Affinity if you can. If you're in black, definitely throw this in your deck. Moving on, a card I'm still testing. I don't think it's very good, but I think it's good enough for what I'm trying to do. Genesis Chamber is a artifact for 2 mana. As long as it's untapped, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, its controller creates a 1/1 colorless mirror. This includes your opponents, I am aware. I still think it's worth playing because you just get to have an extra creature every time you cast a creature, which is often. Mind you, there are, costs. Like we are playing ways to trample through 1/1s. We'll get to that. But sometimes them also having the 1/1 is just not good for you. It's way better for you than it is for them. That's not a question. But it is not free 100% of the time. Moving on. Key to the City. 2 mana artifact. Tap it, discard a card. Up to 1 target creature this turn can't be blocked. Up to 1. So you don't have to target. And whenever Key to the City becomes untapped, you may pay 2 if you do draw a card. This has been one of my favorite cards ever for a long time. It's in the same kind of category as Unearth. Discarding a card is often not a problem, and also like sometimes it's just good because you can get stuff back with Scrap Trawler, and other like Unearth even. You just get to have the recursion. Silas Renn gives you recursion. Discarding a card is never like really a problem. And up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn is nuts with Akiri when we're trying to just push damage through. You get an artifact that makes Akiri unblockable that doesn't need to be equipped. Perfect. And paying 2 to draw a card on your upkeep just replaces the card that you discarded if you need to. I've way more than often paid 2 than haven't. I think this card's nuts. Moving on. Nettle Cyst. This is Cranial Plating's bigger, newer, older brother. It is 3 mana for a living weapon, so it makes a 0/0 black Phyrexian germ creature when it enters and attaches to it. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control. We're playing 1 enchantment in the main and some in the side, but this card is really good because it gives toughness as well as power. And equip 2 is not a huge cost, and it comes with a creature, so you don't even have to equip it to anything. It just becomes a second copy of like Master of Ethereum. I think this card's really good, way worth playing. Nihil Spellbomb is main deck graveyard hate that is not 100% dedicated graveyard hate. We'll get to the other one in a little bit, but this card is really sweet and lets you draw a card if you need it to. Moving on, Portable Hole is awesome removal. I think this card is kind of broken, but it's just O-Ring for a 2 mana value permanent, non-land permanent, for 1 white mana, and it's an artifact, so it counts towards your artifact count for Akiri. I'm a big fan. You can also recast it during your turn with Silas Renn. Sweet. It's big fan. Shadow Spear is the trample I was talking about earlier. This is Urza's Saga's best friend, and it gives the equipped creature +1/+1 and trample and lifelink, and then an ability that I've never activated, but I intend to someday. 1 mana, permanents your opponent's control, lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, and equip 2. This is just sweet. It makes your creatures just a little bit nicer, and lets them get through. Namely, it doesn't redundantly give Akiri or Silas Renn an ability, but it does give them trample and lifelink, and just so good for 1 mana. So outrageous that this card is what it is. Well worth picking up if you don't have one. Springleaf Drum used to be Mox Opal until that was not cool, so now it's Springleaf Drum. I think this card's fine. We more often than not have creatures we don't want to attack with, so tapping them for mana is perfectly reasonable, and this card sets you ahead a couple turns when you do have those creatures. Notably, we're not playing any 0-drops. We're not playing Ornithopter or Memnite. They just don't have enough text, I think, for this format. But Springleaf Drum is really awesome with our like tokens that we're creating, or even like Scrap Trawler, who we don't want to send into the red zone because it might die. And yes, it would get something back, but we want it on the battlefield to get more things back. Next is the classic combo of Sword of the Meek and Thopter Foundry. I'm going to talk about them together, but I'll keep Sword of the Meek up for now and change it over in a moment. Sword of the Meek 2 mana equipment gets +1/+2, equip 2, and whenever a 1/1 creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may return Sword of the Meek from your graveyard to the battlefield, then attach it to that creature. I'm going to name some 1/1 creatures that we have entering the battlefield, and I'll stop when I feel like it. Thopter, Mirror, Servo, Baleful Strix, Bomac Courier, Esper Sentinel, Steel Overseer, Walking Ballista, Zabaz, Arcbound Ravager. You get the idea. But it combos with Thopter Foundry for white-black hybrid and a blue. It's an artifact, pay 1, sacrifice a non-token artifact, create a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature token with flying, you gain 1 life. No, this is not infinite, this is just so value. You sacrifice the sword, you get a 1/1, the 1/1 comes back, the sword comes back, attached to the 1/1, you sacrifice the sword, you continue and continue and continue. We don't have a means to go infinite in the deck, that's fine. The value is just too good anyways. Notably, with Master of Ethereum, the combo is turned off because they enter as 2/2s. However, they're all of these cards are still worth playing, especially when we're like just generating that awesome value. Thopter Sword combo is a classic of artifact decks. Definitely try it out if you have the means to play an Esper deck. And then the final non-creature wink card artifact we have in our deck is Unlicensed Hearse. It's a 2 mana vehicle with crew 2, and it has tap, exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. Unlicensed Hearse's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards exiled with it. More often than not, this will be a large number because it is just incidental graveyard hate as a creature that you can beat their face in with. Notably, if they're not doing graveyard things, it's one of the first cards I tend to cut, along with Nihil Spellbomb. But this is more dedicated graveyard hate than it is creature. Most importantly, if they don't have cards in their graveyard, this just becomes a artifact on the battlefield. But it is so worth playing. Because graveyard decks have a really hard time playing around Hearse. It just sits on the battlefield, and when they try to interact with the cards in their graveyard, they just go away. Totally worth playing. Definitely does get cut in post-board games, but it's just that good. It's definitely worth playing. Moving on. We're going to talk about lands broadly real quick. I'm playing all of the dual artifact lands, so all of the bridges and all of the original 4 that I can play artifact lands. So these enter untapped, they're artifact lands, and they just tap for their color, so white, blue, black, and red. And I should amend, I'm only playing the ones that I can play, the artifact lands. I can't play the green ones, so there's 4 that I'm not playing. We're playing the other 6. On top of those, we are playing Power Depot, which has modular, so it's not a creature with modular, but it is an artifact we can sacrifice, and it does fix our mana towards artifacts we cast, and we are playing a lot of colored artifacts, including one of our commanders, Silas. Moving on, we have Prismatic Vista. I just like this card. We are playing one of each snow basic that we can play, just for fun. I used to play Arkham's Astrolabe, but it was really inconsistent casting it, so I took it out. That was when I was playing fetches over the bridges, but I feel like the bridges are infinitely better with our commander. It doesn't matter that they enter untapped. We don't really care that much, because only 6 out of our 18 lands, that's a third of our lands. A third of the time we can play a different land that will enter untapped. Totally fine. We also have Spire of Industry, which is like a command tower, but it also makes it colorless, so it's fine. We could be playing command tower, but whatever. We have too many cards that we want to play. I like Spire of Industry. It's fun. Whatever. Urza Saga. Where do I start? This is the only enchantment in the deck. How do I start talking about Urza's Saga? Tell you what. Here's what we'll do. You're gonna read the card, and I'm just gonna wait here for a moment, and we'll talk about it in a moment. So take your time. Just read it quick. Great. Now that you've read Urza's Saga, I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. It is 2 construct tokens in an overcoat that becomes a 1-mana artifact, which we are playing a ton of. We're playing removal, synergy, combo, creatures, a bunch of stuff at 1 mana. It can just go get any of those things that we need at any given time. And notably, it just is a land. They can't interact with playing it. They can get rid of it if they have a way to do that, but it's just a hard permanent to interact with. So, yeah, play Urza's Saga if you can. I like that card. Finally, we have a sideboard. Okay, so you can see it. Some tiny leader groups don't do sideboards. I feel like we have discussed this in an episode of our podcast, but the idea of using a sideboard in a format that is 1v1 is a little essential. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially because normally these games don't go very long. Making it a best of 3 format is healthy, and having that best of 3 have a sideboard is even more healthy, in my opinion. So, we have Deafening Silence, which I'll bring them up on the card reader. Deafening Silence. Each player can't cast more than 1 non-creature spell each turn. This includes you, but it is 1 mana. It just stops the I'm gonna cast a bunch of spells deck for 1 white mana. Definitely worth playing. Disenchant. Destroy target artifact or enchantment as an instant for 1 and a white. Very classic sideboard card. Very good against artifacts and enchantments, and that's about it. An awesome answer to really whatever is stopping you. Notably, you are playing artifact lands, so if they're playing Stony Silence, it's going to be a little harder to cast the 1 and a white. But for the most part, you'll figure it out, I think. Dispatch. It's Swords to Plowshares, except they don't gain the life because we want to be killing them with our creatures. And you have to have Metalcraft to exile the creature, otherwise it just taps it. Which is still fine. If you can tap a creature to get through for combat, that's the point anyways. That's why we're playing this over Swords to Plowshares. Aethersworn Canonist is the same card as Deafening Silence, except it's a creature, so it dies easier, but it does let you cast more than 1 spell every turn, because it only cares about non-artifact spells, and our deck is playing 38 artifacts, and then 4 non-artifact spells, so totally worth playing. It wasn't the main board for a while, but it just kind of became like a 2/2 that ate a lightning bolt most of the time. It didn't like kill decks more often than I thought it would, so it's in the sideboard and it comes in during a lot of games. Executioner's Capsule is awesome. It is removal that is redundant with Silas Renn. Destroy target non-black creature. Non-black is tough, that's why it's in the sideboard. A lot of times black is a pretty popular color for tiny leaders, and this doesn't kill everything, but in decks where it does kill everything, totally worth playing. Absolutely recommend it 100%. Mystical Dispute is awesome. It is instant for 2 and a blue, but this spell costs 2 less to cast. If it targets a blue spell, counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. That's a high cost to pay. More often than not, this is just 1 blue for counter target spell in the blue matchups. They happen. Great tempo card if you could just hold a blue open. More often than not on turn 2, you're going to have tapped land and untapped land because you're going to play a bridge or something like that. So as long as the untapped land is a blue, this is an awesome answer for whatever tempo that you're trying to get. Nihil Spellbomb. Same for me. Oh. Huh. Well, that's funny. Hold on a minute. Now that I've gone through this deck, I should know what card I didn't go over. You know, I'd like to amend. I have the deck in front of me. We totally are playing Command Tower. So let me just change that quick. Boom. 19 lands. Awesome. Love it. Anyway, Nihil Spellbomb. We already talked about it. Good card. Would play it. Sideboard or mainboard, really. Spell Pierce. Another 1 blue counterspell. Counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. There have been a lot of counterspells printed recently, in the past like 2 years, that would take this place, but I feel like this is still like a catch-all kind of tempo play, same as Mystical Dispute, but doesn't need to target a blue card. Definitely a fan of Spell Pierce. Good sideboard card. Tormod's Crypt is a 0 mana artifact that exiles a graveyard. If you can't tell, I am worried about playing against graveyard decks. So we have 2 dedicated cards that Urza Saga can get off of, its final activation. This costs no mana to activate or cast. It is just a free get rid of it, one time. And it targets graveyard, so it doesn't get rid of yours. You'll notice that each graveyard piece I play in this deck gets rid of only one player's. Relic of Progenitus is a little bad for us because we have things like Unearth and Scrap Trawler. We don't want to be getting rid of our graveyard so much. And I feel like we aren't a dedicated graveyard deck that people would bring in graveyard hate against us. They might see Silas Renn and think, oh, I'll get him, but then we just like don't play Silas Renn and we'd continue doing whatever else we were doing. Finally, the last card in our sideboard and the last card in the deck is Wear Tear. That's Wear/Tear. For 1 and a red, destroy target artifact, or 1 white, destroy target enchantment, or 1 white-red, destroy target artifact, and destroy target enchantment. This card is sweet. It's disenchant plus, because sometimes you just get to destroy 2 things, which doesn't happen too often, but like, it's awesome when it does. It feels so, so good when you get to destroy 2 permanents with 1 card. Like, think of like Vindicate targeted 2 things. Oof, so good. Notably though, depending on who you ask, this card costs 3 mana. Fuse and split cards normally these days are counted as their total mana cost, so it's kind of awkward to ask, where the Tiny Leaders rules people land on split cards, and fuse cards especially, because they can be both at the same time. So like Fire Ice, I'm not sure if you can play that in this format because technically it costs 4, but it's 2 and you choose which one you want. But yeah, that's the deck. Akiri and Silas Renn, the facts. I love this deck. Build it if you'd like. Let me know how you think or what you think of it. If you like this deck and you want to see more, subscribe, because we will be posting a bunch of deck techs in the near future. They're reasonably easy to make, and we love making them, so we would love to share the decks that we play with you. Also, if you want to talk about the decks that you want to build or play, or really whatever, come join us on Discord. We have one. The link will be in the comments, and just introduce yourself, come hang out. We set up games sometimes. It's a good time. If you like the song that's playing, I don't know what's playing right now, but I make all of the music for the channel. I'll link the song in the description. It'll be on one of my SoundClouds. And yeah, keep an eye out for more decks in the future, more content. It'll be coming. Thanks so much.